Thank you.
Get your diesel running. Head out on the highway, missing all the roadkill.
Oh, watch out.
Another Truckie Tuesday. Indicate when you're changing from lanes. Do not brake check me in my prime. Australia moves and it's thanks to you guys. Trucks to get there on time. Listen to the air horns. Dip your lights from high beam. HVL that helps you. Thanks to right-hand fame. On the highway driving all day, and at night when the traffic's slow. Getting goods from states across lines. We're ready to go. Without trucks, Australia stops. They're driving around the clock. Never, never giving up. Drive safe tonight.
So it's time for Truckie Tuesday, and it's proudly brought to you by ICEPACK, the toughest there is. A little bit later, we're going to talk to Chris Rowe. Chris Rowe is a renowned and respected owner-driver, because we've had a lot of inquiries over the years from young Australians saying, listen, I'd like to have a crack at this trucking caper, and I might work for myself, be my own boss, the freedom of the road, could do what I want. Well, it's not that easy, folks. It's a very, very interesting life choice. One, to be with a big company where a lot of the safety nets are put in place for you, and to go without a harness and to work for yourself. It's like any small business. There are pros and cons, and we'll look into that. We'll deep dive into the pros and cons of being an owner-driver with Chris Rowe a little bit later on. But right now, once again, Rocket Rod Hannafy, welcome back for another bona fide podcast, Truckie Tuesday.
G'day, mate. Well, it's been a fairly busy week. I left home last Sunday, and as I stand here now, still 2 hours from home, I've actually done 80 and a quarter hours in my logbook. So virtually I've only got 2 hours up my sleeve to get home. Otherwise I'm going to stop on the side of the road for a 24-hour break. That's not going to happen. Done some wool and done some this and done some that. Took a couple of photos, had a couple of blokes help me out on the side of the road yesterday. And it's been quite a while since I've loaded wool bales. Luke, how long since you've loaded wool bales, mate?
Oh, I can't remember now. Never. Never, and not likely to.
No, I didn't think I'd be doing it for a while either, but last week I did some off the farm. This time I did some off the farm, and I already had a part load on. Now, you probably won't know what a wool hook is, Luke, because it's a sort of a rounded thing that has a nice bitey tooth on either side, and when you were moving wool bales, you sort of hook it into the bale, because it's got wool in it, so it's reasonably soft, and you can pull it around.
Yeah.
And that's really good when you've got one of those. But when you've got your wool on top of the load and you have to take it off and then put it back on again and you don't have a wool hook, it's a bloody menace. But anyway, that's been the fun of the week.
Don't you have a crane? Don't you have people that can do that for you?
Not when you're loading direct off the farm. No, he did have a tractor, and that was a bit of a help there. But then, of course, when I went to the place where I had to take the wool off the top of the load to get the load off, and I was really sensible, I rang them first, and I said, look, I've got to get this stuff on. If I bring it there and there's some on top, are you happy to take it off? Yeah, we got a forklift. That's all right. Now, it did take us an extra hour. Of course, the one thing is you can move it with a fork, but you've still got to get it in the right place on the truck and strap it all down and all that sort of stuff as well. So I might have to go and buy a wool hook and hope I never need to use it.
We got a voice message from Shane. Let's have a listen.
Yeah, g'day, Luke. On the subject of best roadhouses and the lack of, mate, I think the new Pacific and Hume Highway got a fair bit to do with it. They bypass all the little towns. You know, you had all your good truck stops right all about for me. You had Grafton, that Kalungaluk, mate, the list goes on. And now everyone sort of loads out of Melbourne and heads up that new road. It steers all the traffic away from the new highway. So you had, West Wyalong, I'm not sure if Balada's still open, but you got Dubbo's closed, Coonabarabran's closed.
Rod?
And he's absolutely right. Every one of those towns along the Pacific Highway that got bypassed, we lost the little spots in them. We lost the roadhouses. They haven't been fully replaced. Yeah, the authorities will say, well, we built a new rest area. Yeah, you did, with room for 10 cars and trucks if you're lucky, but we had 10 of those in every one of those towns that got bypassed. I suppose one thing that people don't really consider in the way of that, Luke, and then you mentioned it one night about a long drive. In the old days where you went through the towns, you sort of slowed down. You might go and get a coffee. You might get a feed. You might go to the loo, and you had a break. And now you get on the freeway and you drive for 10 hours. And it's boring and it's numbing and there's not enough facilities. We've been there, but there's not an incentive to stop a lot of the time. Now, for us, it's our life. We have to learn to do it and survive. Otherwise, you just don't. But how does the average motorist then jump on the freeway and drive for 10 hours when I had someone say to me the other day, I don't know how you do this. I drove for 2 hours and I was falling asleep in the car. So it's something that freeways are really good for, moving traffic and those sorts of things. I believe there was a study done some years ago where they had long, flat, straight sections on it. That was where the more accidents seemed to occur. They seemed to need to have those curves and things in it. And in the past, Luke, we've discussed it with the trucks. You physically drove the truck. You had to be aware. You couldn't just, ignore it or look at the trees for 5 seconds or 10 seconds. You'd be off the road. But with the freeways now, it's been really good to get people somewhere, but it doesn't really improve safety in one way, unless I suppose you've got divided roads, and that's the longer-term solution to some of these roads, isn't it?
Okay, now, Rod, we've got a voice message from Dave. Let's have a listen.
Hey, Luke, I need to talk to Rod as it's time here come up where all the lunatics get out from behind their desks, get behind the wheels of their cars and caravans. I run up out of Brisbane to Queensland, and this last week's been an absolute nightmare. Even just the place today, I had two accompanied learner drivers pull out of side streets in front of me and another truck coming the other way, two different spots on the Bruce Highway. Had it not been for the quick thinking and just dumb luck, we could have had two fatalities.
So that was Dave obviously leaving a voice message while he's on the side of the road, but we got the message. Rod?
Oh, idiots teaching idiots. And no offence is meant to the mums and dads that teach their kids. Jeez, we went through it as well. But if you are teaching them bad habits, and then obviously if that person sitting there said, yes, pull out in front of the truck, how do I get to him, Luke? How do I get to him and say, do you realise how close to death you were and how stupid that was? Unless we include something like that in the licensing process, then those kids are going to do it, they're going to die, and we're going to get the blame, of course, because the truck will run into them.
Yeah, really good voice messages. And, folks, it's that easy. Please leave those messages. And if you'd like us to contact you during any portion of the podcast, leave your contact details in the email, and we're going to talk to Coop and Fergo, who have contacted us next Truckie Tuesday. Rod, just some trucking news I'd like your opinion on. The Australian Trucking Association is now urging motorists not to rely on a truck's flashing right indicator as a signal that it's safe to overtake. And they're asking truck drivers to stop using that indicator like this because of the potential confusion. Now, I always love this when you're driving on the freeway and you may not have good vision ahead. The truck flashes on its right indicator and it was telling me you can go now. But the ATA is asking trucks not to do that and urging motorists not to rely on it. Your thoughts?
Mate, the problem was it was truck law, Lore, as opposed to LAW. And the two instances where it's obviously come unstuck is that, one, the truck has been driving along and is actually going to turn right, of all things. And the car thinks, oh, he's flashing me past. I'll go past, and gets halfway up beside him and the truck's turning right. The other one is when the car doesn't understand and the driver's done the right thing in the truck, he's tried to help him because he's higher. He has better line of sight. The car might have been sitting there for 5 minutes, ducking in and out, in and out, in and out. Truck driver doesn't want him doing that. So he gives the flash. The car sits there and suddenly goes, about 30 seconds later, oh, he wants me to pass, and just pulls straight out without looking. Now, we're trying to help. We can't be responsible for the car driver. But if the car driver then waits and then goes without looking, does the wrong thing, and it has happened, Luke, it has been very close to accidents on the road. So look, I've got to say to you, I actually did it this morning. I had a bloke, and I'm aware of the campaign, but I was on a road where I could see for 3 kilometres. There was a bit of sort of shimmer on the road. Maybe that's why the bloke behind was hesitant. I could see he wanted to overtake, and I just gave one flash. Now, I understand what they're saying. If you do it, then you're accepting responsibility. You're saying you should go. And as a perfect example, Luke, I actually had a caravan to do it to me one day. Oh. We're coming towards a corner.
Yeah.
And this bloke in the caravan gives me a flash.
Yeah.
And I eventually called him up. I said, mate, if I had an F111, I couldn't get past you safely between here and the corner. What's the go? Oh, I thought you'd be right, mate. Now, he doesn't know whether I'm empty, loaded, got two trailers on a 4. I understand what they're saying. And in the past, it's something we've done as a courtesy, but not everybody knew about it. It's led to some incidents. And I believe, in a way, they certainly need to campaign about it. And to say don't ever do it, look, I agree with that intent. Given a certain situation where I believe that it is the safest thing to do and I have sufficient vision, I'll rather do that and help someone than have them sit there as you and I discussed only 2 weeks ago, wait till the end of the long straight as you get to the curve and think, oh, geez, I've got to get past this truck and go then. So I understand their intent. I wish we could include it in education of motorists, and we've already covered that twice today.
Good stuff, Rod. Now, and Rod, because we are dropping this podcast very close to these dates, you may want to comment on this, but it's just a bit of news. There are going to be changed traffic conditions this week as construction continues to work on the M1 Pacific Motorway extension to Raymond Terrace. This is for our New South Wales drivers. These works take place from Monday, October 6th until Friday, October the 10th. Rod?
Mate, it's something we've long waited to join the Pacific Highway onto the motorway into Sydney. It's going to make an enormous difference for traffic. And I think then that once that's done, isn't it Melbourne virtually to Brisbane with no lights? Of course, the Coffs Harbour bypass is just about done as well. But that's been a very big bottleneck there through Raymond Terrace, and it'll be good to see it done. We're looking forward to it being finished. And I suppose the other thing, Luke, is that, as we just discussed, as long as people know what they're doing, monitor themselves, drive safely, plan their trip, then it's got to be a safer way for everybody in the end.
Now, my boss, the millennial, has just left the studio. So quickly, mind you, she edits she's the one that edits this.
She's going to know anyway.
But she's going to. I don't know, what am I doing? But anyway, I'm going to say it. You know Granny Sue from Yorkie's Knob?
Yeah.
Kelsey wants to go to Yorkie's Knob.
Right.
Do you ever drive there in your truck? Cairns?
No,
do you go to Cairns?
I was in Townsville yesterday, day before.
Well, why don't you take Kelsey on a road trip and she can observe and record and you can drive it.
That's why we were going to get you. That's why we were going to get you in the truck, remember?
Yeah, I know, but Kelsey wants to go and see Granny Sue and Yorkie's Knob. And I thought if you can get her to Cairns and then she can hitchhike. Yeah. It's just up the road. No, I know. I'm a very bad dad.
Yeah. I could get it to Townsville if we knew we had a bit of time to plan it.
Let's get it to Townsville, then we'll see if we can, see what we can do.
Yeah.
Rod, we've been telling you for a while now that we wanted to talk to a respected and renowned owner-driver in the trucking industry, and at Rod's suggestion, we thought we'd get Chris Rowe. Chris knows all the pitfalls, the pros and cons of being an owner-driver. And Rod, you and I have received over the years, and even whilst doing this podcast, inquiries from young folks wanting to get into the trucking industry. And I remember one caller on radio in particular was a young bloke who had some money, and he was entertaining the thought of buying his own truck and working for himself. And I'm sure it's not a cheap thing to do, but the idea of being your own boss, working your own timetable, and being responsible for yourself is a tempting one. But there are plenty of pitfalls. So, Rod, we've got Chris Rowe on the line, and Chris, welcome to the Bonafide podcast and Truckie Tuesday.
Thanks very much, Luke. I've been enjoying listening to the podcast since since you moved into that area from where you previously were, as much as I used to enjoy listening to your show at night time anyway on the other show.
Chris, I'll ask the first question, but Rod, I want you to please jump in. You just heard what I said in that introduction. I'm sure it's very tempting for people to want to own their own vehicle, to be their own boss, be the owner of their own destiny, and have the freedom of working for themselves. But it's not always easy. So, Rod, would you like to talk to Chris?
Yes. G'day, Chris, mate. It's you've been at it a long time. There are certainly some blokes out there that are still keen to do it. Many that I've spoken to over the last few years have got to that point where doing it on their own has become more difficult because of compliance and all the other factors, but that's been sort of one of those ones just on top of everything else that said it's easier to go and drive for someone else than to do it yourself. Chris, of course, his son has his own truck as well, so they operate together, so it's a couple of generations there. And I did see some figures just recently, Chris, where the number of owner drivers has dropped dramatically. Lots of factors involved, like the same thing with drivers. They're still the same when they're hanging onto the steering wheel, but they've got a lot more responsibility on top of that. And from your point of view, mate, two things. Is it still worth doing? And what's the one factor that you would suggest someone really needs to understand, consider before they sign on the dotted line and sign up for a truck and try and get out there and compete?
Look, there's always a certain element of satisfaction in being the master of your own destiny, as it were. While we've always entertained that that's the idea, in so many ways, as Rod sort of alluded to before, we are not as much the masters of our own destiny as we once were. Compliance now is a huge thing in the industry, the number of hoops and hurdles you have to jump through and be aware of. One of the very, very first things that you need to be is fully educated or as educated as you can be before you make a commitment to something that may well be, the thing that controls your destiny in the future. So the very, very first thing I'd urge anyone to do is to get some very strong advice from accountants, from other people in the industry first, and really know what you're up against, both compliance-wise and dollar-wise, before you take the plunge.
Chris, as a complete novice, I would have thought one of the really scary things about being an owner-driver is you are completely responsible for anything that goes wrong, and repairs to trucks are very, very expensive. You work for a big fleet, you work for one of the big companies, and they take care of it. But if your truck's off the road for an amount of time, you've got no income, and I reckon that'd be scary.
It's particularly scary, Luke, when you consider that if in a big company, for example, that may, let's just pick a number, they've got 100 trucks on the road, then if they have a major breakdown and the truck's off the road, they've lost 1% if they lose one truck, they've lost one, and they got 100, they lose 1% of their productivity. If you're an owner driver and you have one truck off the road, you've lost 100% of your productivity. Exactly. So they're the sort of things that you really need to be aware of before you go into business. One of the things that you need to calculate, it's real easy to calculate that you need a certain level of income for the year, but you've got to consider that over a period of a year, there's going to be many times when you're going to be unable to work. This weekend, for example, a long weekend, you've already lost one working day out of your week if you've done your calculations on a 365-day year, as some mistakenly do. Then those sort of things, public holidays, lost time with breakdowns, lost time with things that are just out of your control. All these sort of things can contribute to making the financial rewards that much less.
So, Chris, the second part of that was, what is the one critical thing that you must understand? Now, you said there that you need to have information and advice, and that's valuable, and where you get that from, of course, advice is only good as the people that give it to you. But would you agree that probably the one thing that I see from the outside and that I hear and that I think is a really critical factor is that people don't fully understand their costs. Now, you said if they base it on 365 days, they're already in trouble because they've used the wrong figures. If they don't allow for those things, if they don't allow for tyres and the price of fuel to go up and down, if you haven't got that in your contract, well, then you're stuck with it. But then is the one biggest thing. It's one thing to go out and buy the truck. You know what it costs. You got to pay for it. But then, and do people fully understand the cost of running that truck before they go and put in a price? Because they go and say, oh, how much you getting to cart this stuff, mate? $50 a tonne. Oh, right. Gee, I can do it cheaper for that. And, of course, after the first week, you worked out that you should have been charging $55 anyway, but it's too late now because you've committed to it and you didn't know that it was going to cost you $55 a tonne to deliver it. So is that the one biggest thing that people overlook or don't truly understand, do you think?
I think the biggest thing that we don't understand, Rod, is the fact that we're price takers and not price makers.
Yes.
So much of the time when you become a new entrant into the industry, you'll be relying on subcontract work to provide your income. You have very, very little to no control over the rates that you'll be paid for what you're going to do. Fully understanding your costs is paramount. To take a totally conservative approach with all of that, work out what your worst day is going to be, not what your best day is going to be, is a way of going, the best way of doing your calculations to start with. But yeah, your costs are just one of the things that has happened recently. One of the things I found a bit of a bonus many years ago was when we shifted in the industry from being just a small business entity with a partnership, perhaps with a husband and wife as a partnership. Nowadays, you need to be a corporatised entity to be able to operate in the industry. You simply won't get work unless you're a corporation with a proprietary limited entity. So one of the things that I found that by operating under that structure is you were able to separate yourself from the business, because one of the things that an owner-driver will unfortunately do is forget the fact that their own wage is worth something. Their own time and their own work is actually worth something. You know, they'll work out their costs of their vehicle, their tyres, their insurance, their all the costs, and forget the very main person who's got to get something out of it, and that's themselves. And not only have you got to be able to pay yourself the equivalent wage of what you might have been able to earn as a driver, you've also then got to find enough out of it to be able to make a profit on your investments. They're the things that are absolutely critical to consider before you start committing big heaps of your time and finances into becoming an owner-driver.
You see, the thing is, it's kind of, Rod and Chris, it's kind of like the Bunnings effect. No Ma and Pa corner store hardware store can compete with Bunnings because of their how large they are and the buying power they have. So if you're competing as an owner-driver against a large company that has 100 trucks, the quote, I'm assuming, from the large company is going to be always a lot cheaper than what you can deliver, Chris. Is that true?
That's probably true, Luke. But then we've got, and this is the area that if you're going to become an owner-driver that you might need to move into, is to be able to be you've got to be a pretty successful salesperson. So you're going to have to sell to your customer the fact that what you do will be of a far better quality than what the larger corporation or larger company will be able to deliver, because you'll take a personal interest. I've always had a philosophy, it was sort of imparted into me from my father's time in the business, that when somebody put something on the back of your truck, that product actually belonged to somebody, and it was your duty, as it were, to deliver that thing to the end receiver in the same quality as what it was when it went on the back of your truck. And so if you can sell yourself in that way, that the quality of the work that you're going to be performing and create a niche for what you do, then that's the only way you can compete against the major companies.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm just listening to my dad, who was an art director in an advertising agency. And it was a small boutique advertising agency, but you would have been amazed at the clients they had. For example, they had Grace Brothers. They had the Grace Brothers account. And the reason Grace Brothers didn't go to one of the huge advertising agencies was because they loved the care and the detail that Dad's agency provided. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that we've always sort of, as small operators, tend to work towards. You know, you create both a personal and just a very strong ethic about the way you go about things, and create relationships with your customers.
Exactly, relationships.
Look, there's an inherent danger in that sometimes too, because unfortunately you've got to be able to still be prepared for the fact that no matter how good a relationship you might have with a customer, and at times they actually become your friends, the day will always come where that work, for one reason or another, will pass on to somebody else, or a competitor will put pressure on you, and you have to still be able to then separate yourself, as it were, in that no good losing a friendship over a commercial disagreement, you know.
Chris, I guess this is another question that any small business owner has a problem with, and that is bad debt. I mean, if you're an owner-operator, how long can you carry bad debt?
I suppose over the years we've learnt to be careful, I suppose, as it were. If you're subcontracting to any of the major corporations, bad debt isn't a big thing from them. You know, any of the major freight forwarders in this country are always pretty adept at paying you on time. The only thing that with the majors is they'll pay you, but they won't pay you enough. So bad debt's something you need to be very aware of, and it's something that I always sort of muse over, is that oftentimes you'll have a new customer come along and you'll do the work for them on a trust basis, but immediately you'll be providing, you know, thousands of dollars, as it were, in credit to a customer. I wonder if the same approach, you know, if we went into a tyre service or a fuel supplier and said, look, I'll take a couple of $1,000s worth of product and I'll fix you up at the end of next month, whether that, you know, might actually occur, I don't think so.
Okay, Rod, let's cool off for a second and chat about the one thing that truckies complain about the most, getting a good night's sleep. I know you swear by ICEPACK.
Yes, they've been one of my supporters for many years, and I really think their product is terrific.
Let me tell the folks why. They were the first sleeper cab aircon on the market back in 1995.
Right.
They're Aussie-made, built tough, with a Kubota engine, and still the most trusted name out there. Doesn't matter if you're hauling local or interstate, ICEPACK keeps you sharp, safe, and really importantly, well-rested.
And mate, the most important thing about ice packs is they give you a set temperature the whole night.
They've thought of everything. Auto start to protect your battery, wireless remote you can use from 100 metres away, and on the ES model, a heater option for those frosty nights. And right now, if you're getting your install done in Brisbane, mention the code LUKE10, 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 and you'll still get their truck show special. 10% off any new install, plus a free auto start kit valued at $680. Limited time, and there's one per customer. Head to their website, icepack.com.au, to check out their models, their parts, and service agents right across Australia. That's why truckies trust ICEPACK, the toughest there is.
So like Chris said, the bigger companies, they do have overheads. Of course, they don't like to pass on, so they're going to try and pay you less than they're getting anyway if you're working through them. So that's another avenue. Then they'll charge you for insurance and those sorts of things. Then some of them will drag that out. Now, under the closing the loopholes legislation, we've been trying to get a maximum payment term. Now, some people have pushed it out to 30 and 60 and even 90 days, I've heard. And as you say, Luke, how do you carry that debt for somebody else? That's a problem. Your fuel company won't wait for their money. They want it straight away. So those factors mean that as that single truck operator, it is more difficult. As you say, you've got a total responsibility for what happens, and you've got to plan that. So it's above doing the driving. It's organising the loads, the maintenance. And look, in the past, a lot of owner-drivers used to work 100 hours a week. Look, you can't do it now with the law and the monitoring and the controlling and the compliance. But even then, technically, to work on your own truck, you've got to be qualified to do that, or you've got to pay someone to do it. You've got to schedule that in, those days off again that you're not earning money while it's being fixed. So there's a whole raft of things there. And as Chris said, whilst you can go in and say, right, I need X amount of dollars to operate, and there are some people who are happy to pay you a reasonable fee, then there are going to be others who are going to say, no, mate, this is the rate, take it or leave it. Now, there's two things to that. You have to decide whether you can justify taking it, but of course, if you take a cheaper rate, then they expect it all the time. And there has been a bit of a saying, mate, that if you are going to operate at a loss, either because you didn't know your costs or you've taken a rate that's cheap, you're better off sitting at home going broke than driving up and down the highway going broke and then not being able to afford your bills at the end. So it does depend on who you work for. In the past, blokes worked for different companies at different times. Chris has a number of customers, as he said, and you've got to fight to keep those customers and keep them happy. But some niches in the industry, you can get in and find something that nobody else wants to do, like any other job in a way. But if you're out there being a general carrier and competing with the rest, I'm sure you'd say, Chris, it's getting harder and harder, isn't it?
Oh, it is, Rod. It certainly is. And I think, Rod, you've probably heard the old industry adage of that often gets thrown up, and I sort of I wonder about where we're heading as an industry nowadays out of it. But the old story used to be about the two fellas who banded together to buy a truck, couple of mates, and they were going to Queensland and they were buying watermelons in Queensland for $1 each, and they carted them to Melbourne and they were selling them for $1 each. After about 12 months, they had a look at each other and they said, we're not making much money out of this. So they had a big meeting to decide what they were going to do, and then all of a sudden the answer was obvious. What they needed was a bigger truck. and unfortunately, Rod, I think, as an industry, that's exactly where we're heading now. Like we've moved from all the time. There's this crazy thing about productivity in the industry now that we've got bigger and bigger gear all the time, but all of that is all the time aimed at producing a cheaper price to the customer, and that's certainly not sustainable for a small business.
No, there's a lot of money involved in those big combinations. And then, of course, the big companies can afford the PBS application and to buy specialised gear and leave it sit there for 2 months until they get their permits. If you're a bloke that's gone out and set up to try and compete with them at that level, and then something goes astray with your permit or you get caught off route, a whole raft of things that you never used to have to worry about before. Look, as an industry, as you say, I'm a bit concerned where the future lies. I think there's been a real change in how subbies used to fill, so owner drivers used to fill the gaps, Luke. So if you had a fleet of 10 trucks and you ended up with 12 loads, well, you'd contact a subby and you'd get two to do the other 2 loads for you. And the big companies operated that way a lot of the time because they didn't want a whole heap of trucks sitting there when they didn't have the work. But now that it seems to have changed the way things operate. Some of those big fleets, in a conversation the other day, don't seem to be using the subbies they did. So the subby's got to find his own and then he's got to compete with them. And you just wonder where that model is going, Chris.
Yeah, things always tend to move in cycles, right? Over 50 years in the industry, I've seen it cycle around and around and around, this sort of thing all the time. At the moment, it tends to be that thing that they want to micromanage everything to the nth degree. Some of the bigger corporations, so they want all their own employees and own equipment and then to do the jobs. Equally, I've worked on jobs that have been commandeered by the larger freight forwarders in the nation, and one particular job we used to do was taken over by one of the very large families that run in the transport industry in Australia, and particular leg was between Melbourne and Brisbane. They had that work for over 12 months and never once committed a piece of company equipment to do the job. It was always subcontracted out. Yeah, these things that tend to be cycles, Rod, but the more compliance and micromanagement we have. So even now, as subcontractors to any of these larger companies, you're required to do all the level of compliance that their actual drivers are compliant to do, where we've got to go through the same levels of training and everything as drivers. And they'll, just to make it easy for us, I had a lot of people tell me that they sent the stuff out on a weekend so as we could do it on a weekend just to make it easy for us, Rod, that we could do our
Use your
training on
time
a
up
weekend.
at no charge,
Yeah, exactly.
Question. So if you are thinking of getting into the industry or leaving the big company and working for yourself, would you recommend buying a brand new truck or a second-hand one?
Oh, that's an age-old question. It's very difficult as a new entrant if you've got no previous background and unless you're very well set up financially, it's pretty hard actually to buy a new truck nowadays. Like a brand new prime mover, Rod, there's similar ones to what you've got, and one of the ones we've got now is very close to $500,000 to buy up front for the prime mover, plus your trailing equipment. Unless you've got a fairly strong personal financial situation or you've got a good history with being able to repay your loans, and you're going to find it very difficult to get that sort of finance. So obviously you'll tend to move into a second-hand vehicle first up. It usually tends to be that way. And then, of course, we're up against the vagaries of, gee whiz, I hope that's been well maintained and well looked after. So you'd want to make sure of that before you bought it. Of course, always, no matter whatever happens, machinery is machinery, and you'll always have failures, no matter whether they're brand new or second-hand.
We spoke about Razorback a couple of weeks ago. We talked about the book being available on Mike's podcast, and I really recommend people have a listen to it to see that history. Ted Stevens, when they called a Razorback blockade, and in his book he says he remembers listening to his dad as a kid saying that the industry was being screwed and pushed down. Of course, Razorback came along and they got to that point where they pull up. It's been tried once or twice since, not to that level. In a discussion only 2 days ago with a mate, he said you couldn't block the roads now. We certainly wouldn't have the public support that they did at the time of Razorback. And yet some of those problems that we had all hoped they would solve, and they did fix a few. They got rid of road tax, but then we got fuel excise. They didn't solve them all because virtually Nifty Nev and somebody undercut them and went behind their back, and that's a really sad thing. But it means that no matter what of the magazines that you read or blokes that you talk to, it seems to have carried on. And as you say, we're price takers, not makers. That's a big factor. We don't get together. There are, supposedly 250,000, 500,000 truck drivers, and that includes the owner drivers there. But of them, how many are in associations, Chris? Bugger all.
Yeah, bugger all.
Yep, well, that's where we started. You want to be your own boss and you don't want to be a part of it, but then when it goes pear-shaped or when you need something fixed, a bit of road, we can't get those blokes to join an association so that association has the voice of the industry. And whilst they say they do, that's not truly the case. But what do you see for the future, Chris? Is there a way that we can get more blokes into the associations to give them the weight? Is there... if we can't block the roads, and, of course, the only other alternative is to get blokes to park up, stay at home for 2 weeks. At least they've got toilets and showers and food, where you don't have that on the side of the road. But then we can't go to the government unless we've got 6 problems, 6 solutions, and everybody agrees. And I've probably got more chance of getting 10 truck drivers to agree on 2 things than getting the industry to support a change like that and actually getting something done.
Yeah, interesting to talk about Razorback, Rod. I had some involvement at a local level. Razorback, while Razorback blockade, the centre of it was at obviously Razorback Mountain. There were 40 sites all over Australia, at the time when that happened, that where blockades situated, and you've got to bear in mind that that occurred at a time when we had no mobile phones, we had no internet, we had no SMS, we had nothing like that. We had a pocket full of 20-cent pieces in the local phone box and some very, very sketchy communication via CB radio base stations. But if we go to the what actually occurred, then yes, we got rid of road tax, and road tax was a simply horrible tax that had to go, and a totally inequitable tax, and a tax that cost more to collect than what it actually returned to coffers. And while it was called the Road Maintenance Contribution Act of 1958, all the funds that were collected in road tax went to consolidated revenue and got used for anything other than roads. And I don't think that situation's changed much today, Rod. But
No.
if we go to the log of claims that came down off Razorback Mountain that they took to the government initially, road tax was actually number 8 on the list of claims. And the one claim at the very, very top of all was an equitable freight rate for owner drivers. And that's something we're still searching today. We talk about, that we need people to join associations, and we desperately do. Rod, you and I are probably closer to the end of our careers where we've done as much as we can and tried as hard as we can through the associations and every other thing to get things done. You mentioned before, my son Daniel works with us in the business. He's in his late 30s now, and he mused the other day that because he's always sort of had a keen interest in what occurred with Razorback, and he said, Ted Stevens and Spencer Watling and Jack Ebbett and all the fellas involved in that were blokes in their mid to late 30s at the time. He just muses that, would you find a group of people nowadays of that age that were willing to take the risks and be as committed to the industry and committed to change as what those fellas were. Given the difficulty we have even getting people to be members of an association, I just worry about that, Rod. I just don't know whether we would.
Yeah, and they're putting a lot on the line. Those blokes certainly did, and it cost them more than just money and effort in the end, in the long term, mate. It was the biggest civil insurrection in Australia outside of the Eureka Stockade. And yet, as an industry, and this is where sort of Luke and I have come from over time, Luke. When we first started talking, you didn't understand it. We talked to the average motorist. All they want is the truck out of the way, the stuff delivered yesterday for nothing. And what we give up for them to have that is not recognised. It's not appreciated. And they certainly don't have enough empathy for us in a way. And I think part of the thing is years ago you saw the Kellogg's cornflakes on the back of the truck getting delivered to the supermarket. Well, now much of it's covered. They don't see it. They don't recognise what we do. And I don't think we would have their support as much until, of course, you ran out of toilet paper after the fourth day.
I was about to say the toilet paper trucks. Yes.
That's the one, yeah. And as soon as you ran out of toilet paper, all of a sudden things would change. But whether we get that level of commitment and support, I don't know. So we've just got to keep trying. And I think that's that first point, is to get people to join an association, to have a say, because I know how hard it is to do it on your own. And I've tried through the associations as well. But, Chris, if there was one bit of advice you'd give to a bloke who's already an owner-driver, what would that be?
Just get involved. Even people that may think they're doing all right and they've developed a bit of a niche for themselves and all that, and probably are reluctant to become involved in these associations. But we really, really do need to. There's always strength in numbers, Rod, and we just need people to join, even if you don't want to take an active role. There's so many of the things that the associations are working towards. There's so many problems to fix. Even, as we've spoken before, the fellas at Razorback and during the blockades did a wonderful job with the resources that they had to try and fix the things that they had. But the reality was, at some stage, they had to go back to work and get back to trying to make a living, and the opportunity was sort of lost where we could have joined and formed associations after that. The opportunity was just missed, unfortunately, and that's why today we're still fighting those things. But I'd just urge owner drivers to become involved in things, and also I'd urge any owner drivers to just value their own work and value that as well, and always put a value on it whenever they go and apply for any work that they might be chasing, Rod. To just always remember that your own worth, because that's the thing that we tend as a group, as owner drivers, to discount. The biggest is the fact of our own ability and what our own abilities are worth.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that, mate.
Chris, if you could have a big whiteboard with a line down the middle, on the left pros, on the right cons, do the pros outweigh the cons on being an owner driver?
Maybe, Luke, maybe the cons outweigh the pros, maybe, but at the end of the day, we're in the same sort of, we have the same sort of mindset as farmers, I suppose, and we're all fiercely independent. We all want to hang on, and we'll hang on with our, back in the road tax days, people actually went to jail. They were that desperate to keep their trucks, so we're always, and even yourself, Luke, if I might just comment on that, your determination to hang on after your
punting.
Again, if you looked at pros and cons yourself, Luke, so there's always going to be that fierce determination that you want to succeed, or not so much you want to succeed, but you refuse to be beaten, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the Anzac spirit, isn't it? That's the Anzac spirit. Chris, you are just so interesting, and I've got so many more questions. We might get you back another day. What do you say, Rod?
Absolutely.
Oh, look, I'd be more than happy to come back any day at all. Like as I said before, we really, the whole industry enjoyed listening to your original radio shows, and now I'm sure the podcast has been uptaken and still having Rod on. The biggest advantage is we're getting into mainstream media. Like, we can get into industry media, the big rigs magazines and the owner driver magazines and the industry radio shows, all we like, but all we're doing is preaching to the converted. Luke, what you're doing for us is getting it out there into the mainstream so that people really understand the industry when it's such a hard thing to explain. We just really appreciate what you do for us.
Well, I've got to be honest. I didn't think there was a future in this. Rod Hannafy rang me 10 years ago, 10 years ago. And we had a chat on the air, and he said, have you ever thought about dedicating some decent time to the trucking industry? And I said, no. And he said, and then I thought of it, and I think I went on a road trip, and I finally, for the first time, looked at the trucks in a different way and how they affect all of us. And the very fact that if trucks didn't exist, we'd all starve and we wouldn't have fuel for our cars, and the list goes on. And then we developed it, and then we had Truckie Tuesday, and it went for 20 minutes and then an hour, 2 hours. I think it went for... So I wish I could take credit. I've also got to say thank you to the management of Triple M who saw that it was a good idea, but I can't take credit. It was Rod Hannafy.
Yeah, and the industry as a whole owes Rod Hannafy a debt too, and just as we do, we owe debts to the fellas who were brave enough to do what they did at Razorback, and for people like Rod who are strong enough and dedicate the amount of time. Rod amazes me. I don't know where he finds the time and to do the multitude of things that he's involved in, and I guess it's the same old thing, Luke. If you want something done, ask a busy man to do it.
Chris Rowe, it's been an absolute pleasure and an education, and thank you so much. And please, let's get you back on. And can we invite listeners, if you've got a question for Chris Rowe, owner-driver, Luke Boner, radioguy@gmail.com. And Chris, let's stay in touch.
By all means, Luke, I'd really appreciate that.
Truckie Tuesday proudly brought to you by ICEPACK, the toughest there is. And if it wasn't for ICEPACK, we wouldn't be here. So thank you very much. Rod Hannafy, safe travelling, brother. Talk to you soon.
Cheers, mate. Safe travelling to all.
So, guys, thank you so much for bearing with us through episode 59. There's so much more to come. And if you've got a suggestion on someone like King Charles, Kelsey, get him up.
Stop
I want to talk about...
No ridiculous suggestions, please.
I want to talk to him about the possibility of us becoming a republic. If you could also channel Neil Armstrong, did he really land on the moon? We'll have to do a seance. It'll be a first. It'll be an absolute first, a bona fide seance with Neil Armstrong. It's coming up.
I am not getting haunted because of this podcast, so you should do it by yourself.
Thank you so much. The Bonafide podcast, where I don't tell you what to think. I just like to give you stuff to think about.
And a thought of the day?
Well, it's not a thought. It's just an observation. Did you know in Dubai they don't like the Flintstones?
Why?
Well, don't know. But the people from Abu Dhabi do.
Oh, my God.
Abu Dhabi do!
Oh, my God.
Goodbye.